Welcome to Michelle's Making Coffee, Crafts, Cookies, and Cocktails. If you like what you see, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. Don't forget to comment and let me know what you like.
Welcome and welcome back. Thank you for those of you who are returning. I really do appreciate that. Today is National English Toffee Day. So in honor of that, we're going to make some Heath cookies. Do you remember the Heath bar candy bar? Well, they make bits, Heath bits. And there's a recipe on the back of the bag for cookies. So we're going to stick with that. It's also National Argyle Day. So if you've got Argyle socks or an Argyle sweater, today's the day to wear it. We're going to get going with some coffee. Butter cookie is the creamer of the day. It's quite yummy. Let's get going on our crafts and make it a great day. We're going to start with the Heath Milk Chocolate Toffee Bits cookies. For this, you're going to need the Heath bits. You're going to need your flour, salt, and baking soda sifted together, brown sugar, granulated sugar, eggs, butter, and vanilla. As most recipes start, you'll start by creaming the butter. Once that's complete, you add your sugars, brown sugar and granulated sugar. Don't worry, the recipe's on the bag and I'll put it in the description box. Then you add vanilla. Continue to blend well. The eggs are next, blending after each addition. Once that is all well blended, you're going to begin adding your dry ingredients. Add those a little at a time and make sure you're scraping the bowl well frequently. Once the dry ingredients are well incorporated, you'll stir in the Heath bits by hand. Once that's done, you're going to drop rounded tablespoonfuls onto the cookie sheet that's been lined with parchment paper. You can put a little dab of butter underneath the corners of the parchment paper to help keep it down flat. After the cookie sheet is filled, you will bake the cookies in an oven that's been preheated to 350 degrees for about 10 minutes. Just keep an eye on them, and when they're lightly golden brown around the edge, that's the time to take them out of the oven and enjoy. Our first craft project is a winter weather sign. I began by deconstructing a canvas. Now, I have actually 2 of these canvases that I've had in my closet for several years when I changed decor, and I held on to them thinking I could do something with them. And I began by deconstructing, cutting off the canvas. This isn't a difficult job, but it can be a little tedious. Just stick with it and you'll get the canvas off. Now, it isn't necessary to trim away the extra piece that's left at the back because it is on the back and it's not really going to show. But I like my pieces to look nicely finished, so I went ahead and took that off as well because I didn't want there to be any lumps or pieces sticking out when we reattached the canvas. But I finally got it off and flipped it over and began by painting the canvas with my, you've got it, Rust-Oleum chalk paint in linen white. And it took about 2 coats to get it well covered, and you could still see the design a little bit, but once the project was finished, you couldn't tell at all. I then set the canvas aside to dry and took my antique wax paint and did a dry brushing technique to the frame, including the sides to give it a little character and dimension. To help the canvas dry, I took my handy heat gun to help that process along. Once the canvas was dry, I took some craft glue and hot glue along the edge of the canvas where it was going to meet the frame. Next, I placed the frame on the canvas. Using a razor knife, I trimmed the excess canvas from around the edge of the frame. Once the excess was all trimmed away, I used my staple gun on the back to add a little reinforcement. Next, I took my decorative tape. It's like the washi tape, thin strips, and I took 4 strips and placed them in the frame to give it some character and kind of blocking the area where the design was going to be. Next, I measured the area where my design was going, just to be sure that of the dimensions before I printed it on my Cricut. I then printed the design, and using transfer tape, I position where I want the design to go and rub it onto the canvas. I still haven't found my burnishing tool, so I'm still using my hand right now. But then peel away the transfer tape. Sometimes this can be a little tricky, and you have to roll the transfer tape back on and rub some more just to make sure you get every little piece. And sometimes the really tiny pieces are the most difficult, but just keep working at it and eventually it comes off. I even use my Cricut tool sometimes to get the last little pieces or to make sure something stays in place. And there you have it, our winter weather sign. Our next project is Paint Stick Snowflake. And for this, I took paint sticks and cut off where the handle was on 3 paint sticks. I cut off the first one and then I measured, traced where the cut was on the other 2 so they would be exactly the same size. I'm using these miter shears, which are great, and it's going to come in handy on the little leg pieces for this, but I don't know if the paint sticks are really strong or I'm really weak, but I had to work to get these to cut through. But then we're going to use the handle piece on the stick to cut at a 60-degree angle to add our little legs on. Now you're going to need 12 of these. I had other paint sticks that I was going to use for something else, so I just cut the handles off of them and used that. And here you take your 3 long pieces, and I had the center marked, and glue them together in this pattern. Now, while the glue is still wet, we're going to lay the small pieces in place to make sure that they're positioned all right. As you see me doing here, I have to adjust the sticks a little bit, but eventually I get everything in order. And once it is, I place a jar of paint in the center so that those large sticks will dry. Once the main body of the snowflake has dried, it's time to add the small pieces, 2 at the bottom of each leg. And I use these little clamps that I got from Dollar Tree, and they work great for this type of thing. You'll do this to all 6 legs using all 12 of the pieces. And I actually added a little extra glue for reinforcement on the back side because they were still moving and shifting around a little bit, trying to keep them glued on the edge of the paint stick. It was a little tricky, but the extra glue did the trick. Next, I took a snowflake ornament left over from Christmas that I'd gotten at Dollar Tree and sanded off the glitter. I also sanded off the extra glue on the back where I had added it to the legs. Now, using that Rust-Oleum chalk paint again, we're going to go lightly over the wood because I still wanted some of the wood to show through. I flipped the snowflake over and did the back as well, and the sides. Then, using the antique wax and a dry brush technique, I gave a little dimension and distressed look to the snowflake. You see I'm dabbing the paint on my work table there and really only pulling off the paint from there again when I need more on the brush. I did the same painting technique to the small snowflake that's going to go in the center, and then using the heat gun again to kind of speed up the process so that I can hot glue the snowflake to the center of the snowflake we're making. Once the pieces are dry, I hot glue the small snowflake ornament to the center of our snowflake. And there you have it, our paint stick snowflake decor piece. Our final project are snowy branches in a sweater vase. For this, I used an old sweater from the Goodwill and 2 jars, a short squared jar and a tall mason type jar. I measured the sweater to see how much I need and cut off the piece for the squared jar. Now this one I sprayed with an adhesive, and this is the adhesive I used. I'm not sure where I got it, but maybe you'd be able to find the product if you're looking for it. It's a great product, very tacky, and it kept the sweater well attached to the glass. And sometimes that can be a little difficult, but you can see how sticky it was here. And good thing I had gloves on, because all it took was light tapping and it stuck down. And then I tucked the excess sweater into the jar. The tall jar fit right into the sleeve, so I measured how much I would need. I debated whether I was going to cinch the top and leave a little ruffle-like or fold it in like I had done the other one, but I still would need a little excess at the top, so I allowed for that and then cut off the sweater at the bottom. I hot glued it at the bottom, and I apologize, I forgot to start the camera again when I was gluing it down. But I did manage to get that glued down, as you'll see here. I decided to cinch the top with a jute cord. So once this had dried, I turned it over and wrapped a jute cord around the neck of the jar several times and tied it in a knot. I then made a simple bow by wrapping the jute cord around my fingers a few times and tying it off. I do apologize, I was a little out of the camera shot there. I'm working a little with the handicap right now. We're redoing the craft area, and this is a month-long project, so I don't always have the best lighting or the largest area to work in right now. I then attach the bow to the front of the jar with hot glue and trim up the ends. Next, we're going to move on to making our snowy branches for this vase. And I started by going outside and trimming down some of the branches from a bush in my backyard. I spray painted them white, and then using Mod Podge and Epsom salt, I gave the branches a snowy look. I painted on the Mod Podge with a paintbrush and then dipped it and kind of like sprinkled the Epsom salt onto the wet branches. I did this for 4 or 5 branches. This gave the branches a glistening, snowy appearance. And there you have it, snowy branches in a sweater vase. Well, folks, that's it for another week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate that you stayed around till the end. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and please comment and let me know the things that you'd like to see. Let's make it a great week. See you next Friday, and don't forget to make time to stop and smell the coffee.